Welcome to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. Today on the Jonathan Kinloch Show, we'll be talking to Ken Coleman, who is a spokesperson for DATA, as well as a member of DATA. DATA stands for Detroit Authorized Towing Association, and we're going to talk about one of their major concerns as it relates to a proposal that has been under consideration by the City of Detroit Police Department as well as the Detroit City Council. So when we get back, we'll have a conversation with Ken Coleman and Tony Thomas of DATA. Welcome back to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. Ken Coleman, you are the spokesperson for, or one part of the spokesperson team for DATA, Detroit Authorized Towing Association, and you have basically been working with this team of towers to address a serious concern by these Detroit business owners. And the City of Detroit Purchasing Department has been considering, and I believe they proposed to the Detroit City Council a restructuring of how the towing operations in the city of Detroit operate. Very controversial plan that has been viewed by the tours in the city, many tours in the city of Detroit. Can you give us a brief background of what's going on here?
First of all, thanks for having us, Jonathan. That was an excellent thumbnail sketch of where we are. Yes, the Detroit Authorized Towing Association is a group of about 20 police authorized towers. Now, for your viewers, particularly those who live and work in Detroit, there is a distinction between towing companies that tow for municipal parking. If you see a tow truck maybe on the street towing a car that's illegally parked, that's probably not a police authorized tower. If you see a tower on the highway and there's an accident scene or, heaven forbid, a crime scene or something of that nature, that is a police authorized tower. That is an independent, privately owned towing company that has a permit with the City of Detroit to perform services, in our case, specifically for Detroit police officers. Our organization, DATA, has more than 500 years of collective experience in terms of carrying out police authorized towing. It is a skill set, Jonathan, that is a very precise and one with precision. You have to really be experienced at doing it. And our concern, quite frankly, Jonathan, is we see a move afoot by the city administration that could have a devastating effect on the members of DATA, and therefore people who pay taxes in the city of Detroit, people who employ Detroiters, and people who operate their businesses in Detroit proper.
Well, you have the City of Detroit who's saying, look, has been some previous concerns as it relates to how the city administered its towing operation, and particularly how it let out contracts. Sure. And that brought about this whole concern of how and need, from the city's perspective, to restructure its towing operation. There have been published reports in the past raising some issues and concerns on how the city actually issued towing orders. So do you believe that there is a need for the city to address some of these concerns that have been highlighted in years past as it relates to the city's towing operation?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that point, Jonathan, because members of DATA, the Detroit Authorized Towing Association, has really worked hand in hand with the City of Detroit to address a lot of those concerns. Many of those concerns, Jonathan, were highlighted in an Auditor General's report issued in 2010. It cited a number of challenges in this process. But what happened was the city authorized towers, the Detroit Authorized Towing Association and its members worked with the city to alleviate 95% of those concerns. And where we are right now, in October 2012, Jonathan, is 95% of the areas cited in the 2010 Auditor General's report had been alleviated. We now have a 5-year process where all of our members, Tony Thomas included in DATA, all of us have a permit to operate in the city of Detroit. And we have really sort of fine-tuned the work that we do. All of our sites are up to code. We obviously operate businesses in the city of Detroit. We comply with all zoning laws related to operating a business, and we are very much compliant with the concerns that the city has had in the past. And so now what we're saying, Jonathan, is after all of that process, after a process now where Tony Thomas now has a 5-year permit to operate as a police authorized tower in the city of Detroit, after he's gone through all that process, made all that investment, made all those improvements, now there's a move afoot that would really, in a very real way, threaten his opportunity to provide a good service to the city of Detroit, tax income to the city coffers, and employ people who live in this Detroit area.
The city of Detroit is, or was at least, proposing a contract with Auto Return. Auto Return would basically oversee the city's towing operations. From the city of Detroit perspective, this would add more revenue into the city's revenue stream. So from a citizen's perspective, why shouldn't the city of Detroit approve this contract with Auto Return, especially if it's able to generate more revenue when we have a city that is currently under state oversight? You have the consent agreement, reduction in police wages and other city employees' wages. Why shouldn't the city try to find new ways of generating new revenue within the scope of its ability?
Well, I think it's a great question, Jonathan. As you know, we've known each other for years. I'm a lifelong Detroiter. We both grew up working on council staffs. We understand the legislative process. We understand city government. I've had the great opportunity to serve on the Detroit Charter Revision Commission. And so as a Detroit resident, I think the city government should look for ways to become lean, mean, and efficient. But the question becomes, is this a good area? Is this an area where the city can become lean, mean, and efficient? I mean, let's be candid. The reality is that our firms, members of data, operate 20 lots, 20 storage lots throughout the city of Detroit, all points in the city, where they store cars that have been retrieved under the direction of the Detroit Police Department. Can the city really do that right now when it is laying off workers, getting leaner and meaner, reducing the size of government itself? Is this really something that the city can take on its own? You mentioned Auto Return, the San Francisco, California-based company.
That also has a Detroit partner. Detroit partner.
Absolutely. Absolutely, not to cut you off. We do understand that at least right now, Auto Return, whether it's Auto Return or Auto Return Detroit, is not as much on the table from the city administration as the municipal parking department. The presentation that Andre Duperry, the chief purchasing officer, gave to City Council, the City Council committee a few weeks ago, Mr. Duperry lifted up municipal parking as being really sort of the point department, if you will, in terms of storage of police authorized tows after they've been towed by people like Mr. Thomas. They would go to a city-run lot, in effect managed by municipal parking. So it's unclear to us.
So let me ask you, so the towing, that's the piece, that the storage cost that currently, storing revenue that would go to the towing companies, if the city of Detroit would be actually dealing with the storage of these vehicles, they would generate revenue from it. So why, I'm saying from the city of Detroit perspective, why would this be a bad thing? And we got to take a break, but I want you to respond on the other side of this break. Welcome back to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. Before the break, I was just asking you a question about the need for revenue for the city of Detroit and the plan, at least, or discussion to actually have the city municipal parking department store vehicles after they are towed. That would allow for the city of Detroit to collect revenue from the storage costs that are currently going to outside entities. Is the opportunity to create revenue for the city within the scope of the city's ability, and not have to go to Lansing asking for enabling legislation. Is something that the city could do from a policy and a contractual standpoint. Why is this a bad thing? It's for the city of Detroit, but more so for its citizens.
Right. Let me just answer that question in two parts. One, first of all, the city receives revenue now from authorized towers who operate their business, their yards, their storage facilities within the city of Detroit. I mean, they're paying property tax, they're paying city income tax. So let's not forget that there is revenue that the city is receiving every day from the current arrangement. That's the first thing. So there is revenue coming in. The question, to get right at your question, if the city were to take on the storage portion of this procedure, and your point is, wouldn't that be good for the city in terms of its ability to bring in revenue? Well, first off, the city is going to have to make a considerable investment just to be able to get a return on the investment. Again, we're talking about particularly with data, we're talking about firms that operate 18 to 20 yards, Tony?
Every bit of them.
Yeah.
So to store the vehicles, we're talking about land. The city, I think that would be a far better use instead of actually turning into farms that's currently being proposed by the administration.
Not that we're opposed to urban farming, but
I'm saying at the scale that they're
proposing. Tony Thomas is a member of Data, and obviously his firm has a storage yard. I think it's more than a notion, Tony, to expect a city that hasn't done this for years to jump into it and expect to make a revenue at some point. I mean, talk about.
I mean, they have to realize that there's cost involved. There's security you have to deal with 24 hours. There's fencing, walls you have to put up to be zoned properly. There's several costs. There's camera systems. It goes on and on.
So you just don't store these vehicles.
You just don't collect the money and go home at the end of the day. I mean, you're definitely liability insurances. The car has to stay on the property and then be redeemed afterwards. A lot of cars stay on the property, they're never picked up, and you don't receive that income for storage. There's a lot of different factors when it comes to that.
So it's like I said, it's not just having wide open space, parking a vehicle, and having a few folks to monitor, track, and to release the cars.
And Jonathan, it's a great point, Tony. And let me just give your viewers a sense of the volume that we're talking about here. Through authorized police tows, the city averages about 30,000 tows a year. That is a lot of units, cars physically going in and out. So these cannot be city-owned lots that were perhaps old, building structures out, where you tear down a structure and you've got, acreage there that's just there. It's got to be built up. It's got to be a facility that can house and secure and be liable for the vehicles that are there.
How much revenue do you have an estimate as far as how much revenue?
And that's what I was just going to get at. The Board of Police Commissioners, for example, Reverend Warfield presented a plan to the Detroit City Council Committee, the Public Health and Safety Committee, a couple of weeks ago. He has estimated that I think about $2 million, about 1.5 or $2 million could be brought in revenue in the city of Detroit through increasing the towing the fee on a tow. Right now, the tow fee is $75. It's been the same since 1996. The Board of Police Commissioners is suggesting that tow rate go up to $150 per tow, which would help provide some of the new revenue that the city needs. The city itself, Mr. Dupere and the purchasing department has said that they can bring in $3 to $5 million of revenue. It's really unclear about how you can raise that type of money, but the reality is you're going to have to make a considerable investment before you can make dollar the first. Okay. Right now, what you have is a process.
Was that made clear to the council, and where is that plan? Where are both of the plans currently?
Where we are right now, the purchasing department has presented to the committee, the Board of Police Commissioners has presented to the committee, and the data members presented to the council committee. They heard all three presentations in the same meeting. Really what's going on now is all parties are sort of talking, sort of hoping to come at a happy median. I know where Data would like to be, Tony and his colleagues would like to be, is to find a solution that that continues to have these businesses operate and make the contribution to the city that they have, to employ people, to pay property tax on their site, to pay payroll tax to the people that they hire, to pay city income tax, for the data members to remain whole, but at the same time find a solution that brings new revenue to the city. I don't think as data we're saying, I know as data we aren't saying that we certainly are concerned with new revenue. We want to see new revenue come to the city. We believe it can be done in a couple different ways. One, a modest rate, a modest increase in the toll rate, but also software that can better and more efficiently carry out this service and actually bring revenue into the city.
Now, earlier in the conversation, I mentioned the whole consideration of auto return, which from my understanding was just the actual dispatch. They would oversee the dispatch of towing calls. And so where is that in all this discussion?
In terms of, we don't really know for sure. What we know for sure is that right now purchasing has said, the purchasing department has said that the municipal parking would manage the tow yards. The current towers would certainly continue to be part of the towing process itself. Again, they've been towing for 14 years without an increase, 16 years without an increase. And there would be some type of software solution in the mix. We don't know whether or not it's auto return or something else. And so really what's on the table right now in terms of what's been part of the public discussion is municipal parking getting into the police authorized towing storage business. That's what's public. That's what we know.
Well, Tony Thomas, who is an owner of one of the members of DATA, owners of the towing company, is a member of DATA. On the other side of the break, I want to talk to you about the impact of any decision that if the city accept or make the decision that is pending before it from the purchasing department, what type of impact will it actually have on jobs, and particularly from your perspective. We'll be right back on the other side of this break. Welcome to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. Mr. Thomas, the City of Detroit is considering a proposal that many of the members of DATA is opposed to it. We had some discussions, Ken and I, earlier in the show regarding the broader impact and policy impact, but I wanted to hear from you exactly what would be the personal impact both to you and your employees.
Personally, we have, our business is about 95% City of Detroit towing. There were comments made in some of the meetings we attended that stated, well, we're sure the City of Detroit's not your only customer. When you get into the business in the City of Detroit, it's a 24-hour business. It's 365 days a year. You do not, you get outside work. There is some outside work. You try to tackle anything you can, but your priorities are here in Detroit. It's not something, you have to have a certain amount of trucks available for the work you are given. If we didn't have our impound yard, we would lose over 75% of our employees if we can survive. The outside work is not out there with the economy as it is now. There's not a lot out there. The police towing and impound yards generate second tows. We bring a car to our facility for the Detroit Police Department, and it's possible we can work with the customer and take the car back to their home, to a dealership. There's many opportunities from towing the car in. If we don't have them cars at our yard and we're just towing them to municipal parking, we won't have that opportunity to capture that work. In order to remain in the city and to keep our yards open and pay taxes on the yard and pay the employees and hire Detroiters, it's somewhere, you can't have one without the other.
How many employees are we talking from the collective of employees from the membership?
Ken might have the numbers on that.
Absolutely. Data has about 200 employees. A lot of these firms, Jonathan, you have to understand, are family-owned businesses. They're mom and pops, if you will. We've got, one of our members, one of our business members is a husband and wife team. Another gentleman, Mr. Washington, has been towing for more than 50 years. He essentially works the business by himself.
Still out there.
Family, but he's been so these aren't, I think what I would like for your viewers to get a sense of, these are businesses that the vast majority of them do Detroit Police Authorized Towing, and that's basically essentially all they do. It's a fantastic service for the city of Detroit. It is a business, an industry, a vocation that they have honed over the years. They understand, they know. Again, let me just go apples to apples with this and point out what we're talking about here, what the city is talking about here, at least right now. Taking from people like Tony Thomas and his member businesses, vital business and a vital contribution financially and otherwise that they make to the city, taking that from them and giving it to a department that does about 3,000 tows a year of municipal parking, as opposed to what they do, 30,000 cars. So a city that now has getting close to about 10,000 employees, one of the smallest departments in the city, municipal parking, you're talking about taking from about 20 businesses, basically putting 20 businesses virtually out of business to give it to a department, quite frankly, which is not ready, won't be ready for some time to take on work. Mr. Thomas told you it doesn't stop. This work doesn't stop. It's 24/7. It'd be one thing if you could be in suspended animation for the next 3 years while you could build up storage yards or impound yards. But you're going to continue to get calls.
Do you all believe that the city of Detroit is actually listening? Are you making headway? This group recently formed, and you've called on a number of folks to hear your plea throughout the community, and there are folks who are concerned about the potential loss of jobs, but more so putting some well-established institutions, small businesses out of business, and so there is some concern there. And so, do you believe that the citizens of Detroit should be concerned and should actually speak to their local council members on this issue?
I think that Detroiters should be concerned. They should contact their member or their council members. They should also contact the mayor's office. But the point that you were making earlier, the question that you asked earlier, was are you gathering community support? I think that we are. A growing number of people are now learning, understanding the issue. They're understanding our point. They're understanding all points. I think where we are right now, Jonathan, with data and our negotiations with the city has been helpful. We presented before City Council. We've talked to members of the administration. And so we are negotiating, if you will, hoping for a good outcome. But at the end of the day, this is where we want to be. We aren't selfish business owners who don't care about the city in which we operate a business. We care about the city of Detroit. Many of our businesses sponsor community events.
You just recently had something for Halloween.
Well, we've got something coming up. One of our members, Boulevard Trumbull Towing, sponsors what we call a trunk or treat every year, where 1,500 kids come and have good family fun around the Halloween holiday. We're out of time. We're out of time, but we're going to continue to keep our eye on this issue. I want to thank you, Ken Coleman, and you, Tony Thomas, for coming on. I know of no safe repository, the ultimate power of society, but the people. If we think them not enlightened enough, the remedy is not to take power from them, but to inform them by education. That's what I hope we do here each week on the Jonathan Kinloch Show, educate you and inform you on all these issues. Until next week, have a great week.